Hello, everyone. This is Bill Griffin. Welcome to Different Take Podcast. If you like this content, please subscribe, like, share, comment. I really appreciate you watching. Today, I am very happy to have with me Gregg Kennard, who is a member of the Georgia State House of Representatives since 2019. He's campaigned for re-election. Mr. Kennard is a pastor and occupational minister. He's also a resident of Lawrenceville and is married with 3 children. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Bill, for having me today.
Appreciate it. So I'll just get started. I know there's a lot of issues, probably talk hours and hours, but so this question was on the this year's 2022 Democratic primary ballot, and 85% responded yes. Should the United States remove obstacles to economic advancement by forgiving all student loan debt? End quote. What do you think the state's role should be regarding this question?
I don't know that I'm in favor of just carte blanche universal removal of all student loan debt. I have some concerns of what that may do to increase and keep going our inflation. That said, I think there's some public service occupations that are worthy of our consideration. I think of teachers, educators in our public school service, especially those who are teaching in our more challenging areas, Title I schools. I think if they teach there for some tenure, maybe 5 years or so, I think that should be a consideration. I think any of our other public service vocations, first responders, if they have some student debt connected to their vocational path, I think that's worthy of consideration as well. Not universal, but I think we should pick our spots and make, especially some of the labor shortages we're having in some of these areas. Mental health would be another one. We have a lot of mental health practitioner openings, and I think servicing some of their debts would be helpful in strengthening that workforce.
That's pretty clear. If so, 2 college students, one same field that you're talking about, where you look at forgiving some of their debt or all of their debt. One pays off their debt, doesn't have any debt, the other one does. What do you do with the one that paid off their debt?
I think you have to look at it case by case. Not all situations are created equal. I think there's a lot of middle income and lower income families that are, their student loan debt is going to have to be serviced for a long time. I know I've got 3 college graduates and we're still whittling away at that, and will be for some time. But each of them are committed to public service work, and I see the value that they bring the community. They have taken a cut and pay. They didn't get into the private sector. They took on a public service job, and they're proud to do so. So I think it's case by case.
Okay, another topic. Are you in favor of the concept of school choice K through 12?
No, I think public education should be funded by taxpayer money, and that's what it goes to. 95% of all of our children in the state attend the public school, and I am not in favor of $1 being wrenched away from public school.
I'm not sure how it gets taken away if it's just a partial amount that would have been spent on the child anyway. Well, how's that a reduction?
Slippery slope, and it's just, I'm hard and fast on that. Taxpayer money, school tax goes to public school, full stop.
What about charter schools?
If they're in the public school arena, yes.
Okay, so this is something that's subject topic in Florida. Do you think it's appropriate that teachers discuss the topic of sexual orientation with children under the age of 10?
I do. I think, it has to be contextualized. I do think it has to be treated with respect and dignity, but I don't think LGBTQ families should be discriminated against because of their orientation or the way that their family is assembled and constructed. No more than a traditional heterosexual family, we don't shy away from certain conversations at that age range. Neither should, I think, the other kinds of families, non-traditional families, should be discriminated against with similarly appropriate conversations.
Should it be part of curriculum?
And as far as the curriculum goes with heterosexual traditional families, take it that far. If that's part of the curriculum, then we don't discriminate.
Who decides?
I'm comfortable. I think it should be protected. I think the boards of educations and the educational departments of states, I'm comfortable with them making that decision. Those are elected positions.
So I'm sorry.
So those are elected positions. So we can let the people say who we want in place to make those decisions for us.
So if you say, I don't know, Gilmer County, small county, they decide they do not want employment agreement with teachers. You can't discuss the topic of sexual orientation. That's up to them. And if Fulton County says, yeah, curriculum, we want the curriculum, that's fine. It's not the state's business is what I'm trying to.
I beg to differ. States paying most of that bill for that school. So I think it is the state's business. We're providing the resources for that school to exist.
So in the case with Gilmer County, you'd say you can't do that.
I don't think there should be discrimination, Bill. I don't think LGBTQ peoples or families should be discriminated against.
I think that's what a lot of parents have trouble with, saying, well, I don't want you, I want to have those conversations with my children. I don't want the teacher. I don't
think we're talking about,
maybe we may be talking about two different things.
We're not talking about sex education here. We're talking about the construction of families. We're not, nobody's teaching 10-year-old kids and younger. We haven't gotten to that part of the health curriculum. We're talking about sex education. We're talking about families and the composition of families. And two dads should be treated with the same approach as a mom and a dad.
I just don't understand how this comes up in school, though. I guess this is what I'm saying. Parents are saying, I don't understand how this comes up in school. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't think it's anything that there's a deliberate action to interject. But what I'm saying is, in the same way we would use the traditional family model to talk about anything that's coming up at that age level, I don't think it should be hands off talking about any other kind of family model. So I don't think we should draw a line in the sand. We will talk about a father, a mother, a two-parent family in whatever conversation is happening at that grade level, and then exempt other kinds of families.
Okay. I think this is kind of a big topic everywhere is, so ask your opinion on this. Do you think climate change is an existential threat to the population?
In my mind, there's no question. And that's why I've been working diligently as part of the Energy Committee and part of the Motor Vehicle Committee to really push and accelerate the electrification of Georgia with EVs, the EV industry, and the infrastructure to sponsor that. So I'm hoping in the next 10 years, Georgia is going to be a real leader in that, and that will impact the economy in so many ways with jobs and the manufacturing new vehicles, as well as help us assist us with the climate crisis we're in.
So it seems to me some people and a lot of people campaign on this. The price of gas at the pump, I guess, depends on how serious people think it is. It's serious enough for the U.S. economy and Georgia to go into it's kind of how big a recession do we want to have? Because if it's true, you couldn't have the price of gas high enough, right? Does that make sense?
It hasn't slowed anybody down. People are still traveling. They're on the roads. So they haven't felt the pain to the point where it's really stopping any consumer spending. However, that's short-lived. It will at some point bring it to a grinding halt. But in my mind, we should have already been there. I mean, the fact that we have slow walked the electrification and EVs, you know, we should have already been there. We have just really taken our time unnecessarily. The
So,
technology there, the infrastructure's been there. We just haven't had the political will to do it. But I am seeing the tides turn now in Georgia. As I mentioned, I'm sit on both of those committees, and we are looking at legislation that's going to really enable the electrification process.
so just talk about the price at the pump. Well, let's ask it this way. What do you think the state's role should be, or should the state expand or constrict the supply of energy? And what steps could they take to do either one?
I just think our role is to set up the infrastructure and the models with enabling legislation that lets at once free markets do their thing, but it also incentivizes free markets like we're about to do with electric vehicle infrastructure. So we're going to really make it easy for that infrastructure, as easy as possible. There is federal money already waiting on us to do something. And I think in the next 10 years, we're going to go from just a couple of thousand electrical charging stations to upwards of 20,000. And so we're looking at putting them in everywhere you can buy gas now. So grocery stores, convenience stores, you'll also see an electric charging station or several of them.
What do you think about the price at the pump? Is the price doubled in the past 4 years or whatever it's gone to? Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing?
Bad thing. But it's symptomatic of a lot of complicated things hitting at one crisis inflection point. Of course, you can't dismiss the effects on the global economy of the pandemic that has created supply and demand. You know, the steps that the federal government and that we took as a state to make sure that businesses remained solvent and open and people didn't lose their houses and evicted out of their apartments with some stimulus money and PPP loan forgiveness, all that was necessary to keep this economy alive and to keep everybody from closing their doors. At the same time, it also, people who had disposable income had good income, but the supply chain had slowed things down. So we had this supply and demand issue that we're still facing. So all of that has been just a recipe for what we're seeing now with inflation and spiking prices. I mean, there's just a lot of demand, there's very little supply. And when you add the Ukraine-Russian war to that and the global tipping point with oil supply and demand, it's a recipe for what we're seeing.
Okay, so that gets me to as you mentioned, a lot of downsides to shutdowns from COVID. Are you aware that if the state of Georgia, the government, has ever made a claim that there was a benefit to the shutdowns, a quantifiable benefit?
I think it was necessary to slow the spread on the front end. You know, and we may not have gone far enough with it. You know, it's just a tough decision, and there were no good decisions to be made during that time. But you know, you can't dismiss the fact that 1 in 500 Americans lost their life to COVID-19. 1 in 500 lost their life to COVID-19. So we can't downplay or minimize that. It was a thing.
Oh, I don't, I mean, nobody dispute that, but I guess my question is, what is your understanding as to what the quantifiable benefit was? Because the shutdowns had a serious cost. So people are looking at it
I think we would
for the next one and going, well, does it make sense to do that again? How do you determine that?
the loss of life would have been greater if we had not had some level of shutdown. Just on the front end, you know, we did shelter in place for a while in Georgia and other states across the country and other nations across the world. They did longer lengths of that, and I think it was necessary. Like I said, this is a once in a lifetime, once in a century event that we're caught flat-footed. I think going forward, we will have a better playbook to be able to deal with this, but the world was caught flat-footed. There was, we were not prepared at all. And I think I give everybody credit for doing just the best they could to just kind of get through it and survive it. And unfortunately, we saw a lot of lives lost during it.
Does the government owe the citizens an answer to that question? What was the quantifiable benefit? Do you think the citizens are owed that?
Yeah, and I think we have some scientists and medical experts who have answered that. They were saying if we don't do something, this is what the numbers will be. And we've had some real data to look at. And again, it was.
Well, I hate to press you on it, but where is it? Because I'd like to know, where is it?
Well, I watched the news during that time, just like you, I'm sure, and there were charts saying this is how we can slow the spread and save lives. And if we don't take certain steps, will be the exponential numbers if we don't do something.
Well, I agree. I saw that. I mean, I saw that too, but that was an estimate of the future. Now, this has already happened. So it seems that a lot of people that sacrificed a lot, including, there's a long list.
Yeah, but to be fair, there were also financial interventions created so that people could keep the doors open of their small business. And I know a lot of businesses in my districts. I make the round and visit a lot of my small business owners, and I ask them, how did you navigate through COVID? Were you able to access the PPP? And most of them, almost to the business, did, and it kept their doors open, and now they're coming back. So that's why we had those interventions.
Well, yeah, I understand that. It just seems that it's going to be very difficult for the next time around to do the same things without some understanding of exactly what some sort of estimate as to what the benefit was. That's
right. I think, we're still not 100% through it, as you know. So I think there's some things that will take some time to really.
Is it unreasonable for the citizens to want the answer to that question? I guess is my question.
I think it's premature for us to say, this is what will happen next time. I think we're a few years away as this thing winds down. But I am sure that when and if there is a next time, we will do it better than this time.
Okay. So just kind of open question. What are and you're really good at answering questions briefly. I love that. So what is just a brief, what your take is on what needs to happen the next legislative session in Georgia?
Sure. I'm working for all Georgians and all folks in my district, but in a lot of ways, there's two Georgias. Georgia works great for a lot of people, and I'm one of them. I'm a lifelong Georgian, a lifelong Gwinnett County resident, and I've had a lot of opportunity, and for me to live the life that I've dreamed and imagined has been, I've worked hard, but it's been relatively easy, and there's been a lot of resources available to me to create the life that I want and I feel like I deserve. I don't think that is the universal story for everybody born in Georgia. I think there's a lot of people who struggle because they have less access to resources. To date, people who suffer from mental health, Georgia is one of the worst states in the nation to be a part of. If you suffer from mental health, we are at the dead bottom of mental health access and treatment. However, that said, a number of us who have been advocating, and really that's one of the reasons I ran for office 4 years ago, is to work on the structure and the system on our mental health infrastructure to improve it. And this year we were able to pass HB 1013, the Mental Health Parity Act, which is going to change Georgia going forward. It's going to take a few more months to get it implemented. But, before the Mental Health Parity Act, and still it's a reality, the largest mental health service provider in our state is Georgia State Prisons. We have criminalized mental health, and most of the people locked up in our state prisons and county jails suffer from mental illness. They're not criminals, they're sick. So, and there's a number of situations like that, people who have certain identities or have certain circumstances in their life that we need to make sure that Georgia is a good state for them to live, work, and play, just like it is for me.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Mr. Kennard. So it's a big topic. What abortion restrictions do you favor, if any?
That's the question of the hour, isn't it? The question is, when does personhood start? When does life begin? And that's really a complicated question. And there's really no right answer. It depends on your view. Even as a Christian, as a pastor, you can't really put everybody in the same basket of how they do this. There are pro-life Christians, there are pro-choice Christians. My opinion has evolved over the years as I have lived my life. I'm the father of 3 daughters. That certainly impacts my worldview. Their female lens is different than my lens. 70%, almost 70% of Georgia women do not like the last ruling of the Supreme Court. And in my opinion, we need to listen to the ladies who are impacted by this. In their opinion, they should carry more weight than people like me. Prior to this ruling, Georgia has kind of hit that middle spot of 20 weeks that we see as viable, that someone could, before 20 weeks, a woman could terminate their pregnancy if they felt to do so. Now with the Supreme Court ruling last week, we're going to see probably the heartbeat bill implemented, but we'll have to see if the legislature wants to go even further with that. I've been comfortable with the Roe v. Wade ruling for some time, as far as before this last change. Making reproductive rights, protecting them, letting a female make those choices for herself with her faith and with her medical advice and her life conditions. I'm an adoptive father, and my wife and I adopted one of our daughters years ago. And it was a situation that came to the church we were working at the time, where a woman had a pregnancy. She knew she could not manage it. It was an untenable situation, and she made the difficult choice of wanting to give the baby away. And we stepped up, and that's been a win-win. It's been a blessing for us. It's been a miracle for everyone involved. We've been able to raise that child with proper resources, proper love, and she's had a great childhood and now has a great life. But it would be easy for me to transfer that experience and say, that's the answer. We should just push adoption, but it's not quite that easy for everybody. As a matter of fact, if there's children of minorities who are unwanted and also that are disabled, the likelihood of being adopted is not very good at all. And then they go into our foster care system, and our foster care system in many cases is traumatic, it's abusive. 60% of all sexually exploited children come from the foster care history. 70% of children in our juvenile system come from foster care. And so one of the things we do at our church is we run a transitional program to end homelessness. So that's mostly what we do, is we serve the poor, and people are coming from homelessness. They come to us. We have 70 bed spaces. We have a residence, we have job training, we have counseling, mental health access, continued education, and we see these folks rehabilitate before our eyes, and we have a very high success rate. But many of the folks that come to us aged out of the foster care system, and now they're homeless, they're broken, they were sexually traumatized by multiple foster care parents. And so that's not all foster care circumstances, it's not all foster care experiences, but it's too common that's happening. And so for us to just say, let the baby be born and then we'll take care of it as a community, that is not happening. That is not happening. And that's why you hear a lot of people say the pro-choice people are really pro-birth, but once they're born, you're not seeing a lot of resources coming from the community to assist that child once it's been born. And I can have a front row seat to that particular dynamic because I see it all the time of these older people aged out of foster care coming to our program, and they're broken.
So would you like to see the law, you'd like to see status quo is what I think you're saying with abortion?
I'm comfortable with where it's been for 50 years.
Okay. On that topic, because there's a lot of, I know you've heard, I can't believe you haven't heard from constituents about this, but the idea of the state government subsidizing abortions. What do you think of that?
I'm not familiar with it. I know Georgia doesn't do it.
Right. But I mean, would you be in favor of such a thing or comfortable with that?
Look at that more deeply. Honestly, I don't have anything to draw from to give you an educated answer on.
Okay. Let me ask this question. Do you think that state tax structure, would you like to see any changes to personal rate 5.75, marginal tax rate, corporate rates 5.75? Would you like to see any changes to that?
All I say is right now it's working. We had passed the largest budget in Georgia history. Of course, we did have the benefit of some American Rescue Plan money that backfilled some of our budget holes, and that won't be there forever. So I think we just have to look at it year to year to see, as long as our revenue stays strong and all of our buckets of money stay solvent so that we can properly fund, the state. I'm comfortable with where it sits now. Now, if there's some different dynamics, the economy changes, revenue changes, then we may have to look at changing some of those tax rates. But right now, for this year and the year before, it works.
So let me ask this. Is it unreasonable for citizens to believe that voting ought to be done in secret? Is that unreasonable?
What do you mean by in secret?
Meaning in total confidence.
Okay, so not at a election office, not at a voting precinct, in public?
No. That's well, my voting experience when I first started voting was in total secrecy. There was a claw. You pulled a curtain and nobody knew who you voted for.
Well, the last few times I've voted in Gwinnett County, there are petitions between the voting.
Right, but that you can't. There's no guarantee of being able to do that when you vote by mail. So if you get a ballot in the mail, there's it arrives at your house, and you might not ever. It's possible you may never even see the ballot.
Mhm.
Or somebody wants to observe you vote. All right, it could be anybody, your dad, your mom, neighbor, whomever, your pastor, whoever.
I've never understood that to be an issue that I've ever even thought about.
See, but is it, my question is it unreasonable to think that should be removed as a possibility? I mean, I have friends that say, and they say this, it's an unknowable thing how often this happens. I've talked to other people about it. Their response is always, well, I don't think that's a big deal because I don't know what's happened. Well, you know that it can happen, and it's impossible to know how often that it happens where a person cedes their vote's observed, they're harassed, they're intimidated, or they even sell their vote.
Well, your voting history is public record anyway, right?
Sure, but not who you vote for.
Okay.
So is that unreasonable for people to think that it ought to be done in secrecy?
I don't know. It's just never been a thing that I've even contemplated. I'd like to hear all the arguments on all sides, but I don't know. Never.
Well, the phrase respect the sanctity of the secret ballot, and that's kind of gone. That kind of idea has kind of gone out of the way when so many people vote by mail and so forth.
Okay.
No.
I don't have an answer for that.
Okay, I guess you're not familiar with that term. Well, I appreciate you doing this, Mr. Kennard. What else? Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Sure. One of the reasons I ran is because of my work at my church and with the homeless and seeing how legislation and policy really impacts those social issues. So I'll continue to work hard for all Georgians, but to especially work on our structures and systems to make sure everyone has access to a good life, to good positive education, health care, justice. And I'm looking forward to serving my district again for the next.
Well, thank you very much for doing this. How can people find you?
My website is rep-greggkennard.com. That's rep-greg, GREGGKENNARD.com. And you can find me on Facebook and all the social media platforms.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you once again. I appreciate everybody watching. We have new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, and thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.